Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be going over big changes which happened overnight, especially with Tropical Storm Henri, which is over Bermuda right now, but it was originally expected to go out to sea, not really be impacting any areas on land. Now it's been taking a fairly dramatic westward shift. It's now expected to move somewhere close to eastern New England and also into southeastern Canada. We're going to be covering that and talking about the big shift within that storm. We'll also briefly touch on the two other storms, Tropical Depression Fred and Tropical Storm Grace, which are both out in the Atlantic. We're going to be going over why Henri has really been shifting fairly far to the west over these past couple of models. So we have a lot to get into, so let's get right into it here. Starting off with your current National Weather Service page, you can see that we have some air quality alerts in effect for the west, as well as some flood watches for a little bit of Arizona, Utah, and a little bit of Colorado, as well as a good portion of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. We have some red flag warnings in effect for Northern California, as well as a little bit of Texas with those flood watches, and then we have some heat advisories for some parts of Florida and Texas. We have those orange or red colors on the sides of your screen right here, and that's tropical storm warning. So that's from both Tropical Storm Henri and also Tropical Storm Grace. Tropical Storm Grace expected to become a hurricane, same with Henri, which is now expected to become either a hurricane or who knows, maybe even a Category 2. The models have really been quite ambitious with moving this further to the west and intensifying it over the past couple of days. Taking a look at yesterday, we had a high temperature of 118 degrees in the Stovepipe Wells, California, with a low temperature in Bodie, California, where they got down to 34 degrees. The highest rainfall report was in Atlanta, Georgia, where they got 7.92 inches of rainfall. That entire area of North Georgia, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee got tons of rainfall yesterday from Tropical Storm Fred, and now, of course, we're seeing the effects of Tropical Storm Fred reaching up into the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Ohio Valley. Taking a look at the current 5-day outlook, you can see that we are seeing just 3 storms. We don't have anything brewing out in this part of the Atlantic, although just because it's not on this map right now does not mean that nothing will form within the next 5 days. Of course, we can still see some tropical development. We have Tropical Storm Grace down here. That's expected to be moving pretty much straight west. And then we have Tropical Storm Henri, which is going to be the main topic of today's video, which is just south of Bermuda right now. We also have Tropical Depression Fred, mainly just bringing rainfall, nothing really too tropical to those areas. Looking at the surface analysis, Tropical Storm Henri is currently located at 30.1 degrees north by 65.7 degrees west. Maximum winds of 65 miles per hour, so just about 10 miles per hour below that hurricane or Category 1 threshold for winds, and then minimum pressure of 998 millibars moving west at about 8 miles per hour. If you remember, yesterday we were looking at this storm being right around 45 miles per hour or even lower. So it's gone up even 20 miles per hour in its intensity, and it looks like this is going to only continue to strengthen because it's not going to be hindered too much with any outside forces. We don't have a lot of wind shear, and the ocean waters are fairly warm within this part of the Atlantic. If we look at the big shift over the past couple of days, this is the Tuesday morning forecast, which was just yesterday. So yesterday, the forecast that we were expecting was for this to move fairly far to the southeast of New England. The northernmost extent of this maybe has some impacts on Cape Cod, but you're barely talking about any impacts. And this was, again, this is the forecast that I was looking at for yesterday's video. So Tuesday morning to yesterday morning, we were looking at this. Now, this is the current forecast. And you can see that not only has the intensity shifted, before we were expecting this to stay as a tropical storm, now we're expecting a hurricane, but look at the track shift as well. Now the northernmost extent has the center of the storm over Cape Cod, and just because the center of the storm is over Cape Cod does not mean the impacts are only over that area. If the center is right here, you're probably dealing with impacts all the way through southeastern New England. So just because we're dealing with maybe the easternmost part of New England getting clipped with some of the cone forecasts. That's mainly just the center of the storm. Again, the outer skirts of the storm will probably have much bigger impacts over a wider area. Also, this is the National Hurricane Center forecast, and we know they don't like to shift too much over just a couple forecasts. And this is actually a fairly big shift for their standards. And what we've seen in the models is that they've shifted even more. The GFS now has this storm making landfall in eastern Long Island and into Connecticut as a fairly strong storm. We have other models also bringing this fairly close. The European model, while it isn't as ambitious as what the GFS model is showing, what some of the other hurricane forecasts are showing, it is also moving northwestward. It's a little bit further northwest than the previous runs. It still has this just barely clipping Cape Cod, but again, the European again is also somewhat like the National Hurricane Center forecast. They don't shift around too much. The European model fairly steady until something drastic happens. It's not going to shift too much. So I wouldn't expect big changes from the European model. We want to keep our eye on the GFS and the Icon models. Those were the two models which last night were the first ones to pick up on this change. And now we're, of course, seeing that most of the models have this coming somewhere close to the New England coast. So we're going to have to continue to monitor this. Taking a look at the current forecast, it's expected to become a hurricane by Friday afternoon, and then through the weekend, and then even into the early part of next week. It's expected to continue as a hurricane. Who knows? Probably somewhere in between here, it'll become a Category 2. And again, it's expected to sustain at least tropical storm status into hurricane status over the next few days. So fairly sizable storm that we do have to watch out for. Again, here's Bermuda, so it is well to the south of there, and now it's curving up further to the northwest. How big that curve is going to be again a big determinant into how far west this storm actually shifts. The current track guidance bring this a lot further west than what we were initially expecting. Yesterday, the bulk of these models, where you're seeing the majority of the lines, would be right in here. Now we're dealing with the updated forecasts, bringing this much closer, and this is over just a 24-hour time span. Imagine how much this is going to change over the next 24 hours if this continues. So we want to watch out. Again, usually in weather forecasting, a common phrase is the trend is your friend. So you really want to watch out for the trend. You don't want to just be focused in on what the current model run is doing. You want to figure out what the next one is going to do, and by all available measures, this will probably shift further west again unless something changes. And we're going to be talking about what in the upper air is allowing this to happen, and we're going to go fairly in depth into why this is happening. Here's the discussion, and I read the whole discussion, but this is just the part that I think is most relevant to the track shift. I'm just going to read this area highlighted in that black box. Thereafter, the aforementioned ridge is forecast to weaken and shift eastward in response to a mid-latitude shortwave trough moving over the northeastern U.S. As a result of the change in the synoptic steering pattern, Henri should turn toward the northwest, north, and then northeast throughout the remaining portion of the forecast. With so much uncertainty or spread in the global and regional models beyond day 3, which is when that storm starts to enter the general area of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. The best approach at this point is to base the NHC forecast on the better performing multi-model consensus guidance, which has once again shifted a bit to the left of the previous track forecast, so a bit further to the west. I think it's worth noting, and this is the National Hurricane Center forecaster speaking. So I think it's worth noting that the GFS V16 model is now showing a shortwave trough building over eastern Canada on Sunday, which causes Henri to move more northward toward the New England coast. Therefore, additional changes or shifts of the track beyond the 60-hour period may be required on subsequent advisories. Due to increased uncertainty in the track forecast, interests along the New England coast should monitor the progress of Henri. So that's a pretty big statement from this NHC forecaster on the most recent discussion. They're talking about potentially a shift further to the west, and they're talking about even the fact that even though it's not in the cone, even though the cone only barely clips southeastern New England, it is more of a possibility day after day, run after run, and hour after hour that this could be shifting further to the west, and that this could impact a decent area of New England and the Northeast. And we're going to talk about that in just a few moments. Looking at the intensity guidance, this has also changed. So you can see that we're expecting this to stay as a tropical storm over the next 60 hours. And then right around Friday into Saturday is when this should bump up, Category 1 status. And again, this is probably going to be a mid or high end Category 1, then dips down back into tropical storm status. This would be right around when it would be making landfall or when it would be moving into colder waters. So either or. It would either be making landfall into somewhere like Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts by this point, or some of the models that don't have it making landfall have this moving into the much colder waters near the Gulf of Maine, just southeast of Nova Scotia, and that would also help the storm weaken out a little bit more. So either or, the storm will probably weaken by Monday or Tuesday of next week. Looking at the chances of tropical storm force winds, even though again the cone only has the forecasted track somewhere around here, look at the tropical storm force winds. These have the potential to impact anywhere from the eastern North Carolina all the way up into Nova Scotia. So that's a fairly broad area, and I think that's not only due to how big the storm will be. It's not actually expected to be too large of a storm. It will be a decent size, but I think this is more due to the uncertainty. They want to cover a large area just because it is so uncertain on what may actually happen with the storm. So you can see that you get into areas like southeastern Massachusetts, you're looking at a 30 to 40% chance of tropical storm force winds, and that was as of 2 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, 1 a.m. Eastern Time. They haven't released the most recent one as of when I'm recording this. I waited a little bit to make this video. Right now it's around 9 o'clock Eastern Time, and I checked before, they didn't update it for the 8 a.m. Guidance, so I'm not sure when they're going to update this, but this is as of 2 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, 1 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm assuming this probably shifted to the west just because the model runs which have recently come out have also shifted to the west. So we can imagine and we can speculate that over the next few hours, the NHC is going to be working hard to figure out what is happening with this storm and why it has been shifting so far to the west. I would not be surprised if within the next couple of NHC updates we see the cone shift dramatically further to the west. Taking a look at the chances of hurricane force wind speeds, those are still all offshore, and again, I'm not too certain on whether this will be able to sustain hurricane force winds all the way until it hits New England or until it moves out into the northern Atlantic, but it is a possibility. Those hurricane force wind speed probabilities are not too far offshore of Cape Cod and southeastern New England, so we do have to watch out for that possibility. Here's a look at the satellite imagery, and this is actually really important to look at because we can see a couple of defined features within the atmosphere. We have tropical storm or tropical depression Fred, which is up here. This is going to help the storm pull away further to the northeast. So here is Bermuda right here. Here is tropical storm Henri. This is going to be moving to the northwest, and then again we have that uncertainty as we head into this area. What's going to happen is that tropical depression Fred will pull away to the north. That'll bring in a shortwave trough on the western end of the Appalachians, and that's going to help the storm kind of steer a little bit further to the west than what was originally expected. Tropical depression Fred will also be able to bring in an abundant area of moisture that'll be streaming up all the way from tropical storm Henri to tropical depression Fred, and that area will help it strengthen a little bit more. So even though tropical depression Fred doesn't look too strong as of now, mainly just a rainstorm, what we're now dealing with is this having implications on tropical storm Henri, which could of course have implications on the eastern United States once again. So taking a look at the upper air map, I'm going to look at the GFS model, and we're going to take a look at first what the upper air map is showing for this current model run, and then we're going to compare it to what was going on over the previous model runs, and we're going to decipher what really has changed. So this would be by tomorrow afternoon, or actually this would be for Friday afternoon, and you can see that we have tropical storm Henri just southeast of the Carolinas. We have your low pressure upper air trough, which is sitting in here, and then we have this big ridge over Canada. We also have tropical depression Fred that would be somewhere on the border of Ontario and Quebec by that point. here would be for Friday afternoon, and then we move this on to Saturday afternoon. Now what we're dealing with is that now, because of this big ridge, which is up into eastern Canada, this is allowing the shortwave trough to dig in to the eastern U.S. and pull in Tropical Storm Henri, which is now here. So originally this storm was just going to kind of move out to sea, but now it's being pulled in by this low pressure right here, and that pulling a feature will allow this and kind of steer this right into somewhere over the New England or northeast coast, depending on exactly where and how strong this upper air feature. The stronger that this low pressure is, the more to the west that this will move. So for example, if this is a much stronger system, it will take away some of the energy from Tropical Storm Henri, but it would maybe even curve that into the mid-Atlantic. Luckily, that's not looking like the case right now. What we have is a weak upper air feature, and we're dealing with this kind of staying a little bit further to the north. It's not being steered in as much, but it's still moving into Cape Cod or southeastern New England by that point, or Long Island, or wherever it ends up being. So the stronger that this upper air low pressure is, the more to the west and the more to the northwest that this storm will curve into. So this storm will curve into the eastern United States with more vigor if this upper air feature is a little bit stronger. And then if we look at for Sunday night, the GFS model has this again making landfall somewhere along southeastern New England or into Long Island. So that's the general area that the GFS at least is bringing it in for landfall. And again, this is not exactly what I'm forecasting. I don't think this will happen exactly like the GFS is showing. I think we will see a lot more changes within the next couple of days. But we have this high pressure up into eastern Canada. Again, we have that low pressure, which by the way is right here by this point. So that upper air feature is to the south now, and they're kind of rotating around each other by this point, somewhat like this. So that's what's happening in the upper air. What I want to look at is where the GFS had the storm making landfall on the previous few model runs. So here's the most recent one. You can see a little bit further to the east, but not a lot of change. If we look at the one before that, so this is the model run for last night, and you can see that we have this making landfall or passing near southeastern New England, but really not making landfall in those areas. It's really just passing through, and it would make landfall probably in Nova Scotia or Maine. If we look at for the previous model run to that, even further to the southeast at the same exact time. And on this model run, I looked through it, it was moving somewhat like this. If we look at the one before that, you can see that over a fairly similar area. If we look at the one before that, it was way to the east. So you can see that we went within the span, and by the way, this is not too far out. This is the model run that happened on Monday late evening into Tuesday early morning. So basically 36 hours ago, we were expecting this storm by this point to be way out here. Now the GFS shifted this, so now it's all the way over here. So we don't know exactly where this is going to be. It looks like it's honing in somewhere over here for the impact zone. But again, we still have a lot of questions with the storm. And also on the upper air feature, just to give you a good idea of a little bit of a better idea of what's happening, you have that high pressure further to the east, but here's tropical depression Fred. You can see this stream of moisture, and it's right in here. You're not really going to be able to pick it out, but this is Fred right in here. You can see that upper air trough digging into the eastern United States. That's being indicated by those drier feature into the eastern U.S. So this is that low pressure trying to pull in this tropical storm Henri. And again, the stronger this storm is, the more this will be pulled in. The weaker, the more outward it will actually be. But this is a good representation of what's happening. We have, again, that trough digging in the east, and then we have tropical depression Fred bringing in all that moisture and helping to pull this further to the north. Tropical storm Henri would not be nearly as strong as it is if tropical depression Fred did not hold up a little bit and kind of wait for tropical storm Henri to move up, because it would not have anywhere near the amount of moisture it has. It would probably still be a middle or even upper end tropical storm, but I don't think we would even be talking about the potential of a category 2 storm if tropical depression Fred was not there. It's causing a lot of disruption in eastern Canada with the upper air features. and that's kind of leaving a slot for Tropical Storm Henri to move somewhere within this entire area from the northeast coast all the way to about Nova Scotia with the landfall zone. So we're going to continue to track this. There's a lot of changes in the forecast. I will be responding to pretty much all of your comments down below. So if you have any questions, just leave them down below. Again, we're going to have probably at least a few more updates. I would assume probably 3 more updates, 2 or 3 more updates, depending on what happens over the next few days. I might even post on my community tab if we see a major shift in this over the next 12 to 24 hours. But again, expect daily uploads over the next few days on this storm, because it is a fairly big deal, especially if this is going to be making a big shift, which we were not expecting just 24 hours ago. 24 hours ago, I was not even really mentioning this on my hurricane updates, just because it was all the way out to sea, wasn't even impacting Bermuda, and it was expected to be mainly a fish storm. I was mostly talking about Tropical Depression Fred and Tropical Storm Grace. Now all that attention is now shifted over to Henri because of some of these recent developments. So again, we're going to have more updates for you guys over the next few days. If you want some updates in the comments, just leave a comment down below and I'll be responding quite shortly. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.